I 32 female lost respect for my husband 29 male. I'm starting to realize that I don't have respect for my husband. He is constantly insecure about our relationship. He gets insecure that I don't want him around if I'm not jumping out of my shoes in excitement when he comes home. Even though I give him a hug and tell him I missed him. He gets insecure about intimacy when we haven't had sex in a week. Even though I've been on my period. He gets insecure if I give him affection because he thinks I do it out of obligation. I tell him I love him. I try to talk about his insecurities and work through them with him. I try to offer a podium to talk and understanding. But he continues to feel insecurities. Now I get pissed in our conversations. And I say exactly how I feel frustrated and why I need him to meet me halfway. And I get a mediocre response of well I need to process that. After the first conversation. Sure. That's fine. Please take the time to process. After the second. Of course I'll clarify and help you understand. After the third. Fourth. Fifth, God knows how many conversations about the exact same thing in so many different ways. I'm at my wit's end. I hate stereotypes, but I can't help but resort to feeling like he needs to freaking man up. I'm not in charge of his feelings. I do not wish to constantly monitor my communication so as to not make him feel insecure. And I certainly do not want to baby him through his feelings. I told him I need him to be direct with me. And what I get in return is I need to process that. Yet days or weeks later his insecurities inevitably pop up again. And we have the same conversation. And I point out that he is feeling the same insecurity. And he goes ahead with the deflection. Guys, I don't know what to do here. Has anyone had a similar experience? Insecurities and attachment issues need to be worked through in therapy in my opinion. These are usually deeply rooted within us from childhood. Even if we haven't experienced any significant trauma throughout our lifetime. Of course nothing is changing in your relationship. You're both stuck in a loop of the same pattern. Couples therapy would be helpful too. We tried couples therapy, but he ended up feeling uncomfortable and stopped wanting to go. He thought there was too much focus on him. Even though we were both sharing vulnerabilities and the therapist was navigating through these issues. He did a counselor in the past, but basically brushed it off because he did his research and didn't really credit his one-on-one therapist with any successful insight. As if she told him everything he already knows. I've tried to convince him to go to a different one with different methods, but he's so stubborn to do it his own way. They were probably too focused on him because they pinpointed that he was the one who needs to do a lot of work in the relationship. He needs to take responsibility for his emotions and it's clear he's not doing the work on his own time since there have been zero improvements. He needs to go back to a therapist and work with them, not try to outsmart them at their job. That's not why he's there. Unless you put it on the table that you're close to being done and fed up. Then he's not going to take any steps because this is working for him. It clearly doesn't matter to him that it's not working for you. But he needs to be aware he's walking on thin ice right now. Maybe that'll light a fire lit under his ass, then hopefully so. I call it space holding. We must hold our own space, and when we can't, we ask others to hold it temporarily. Looks like you will be holding it indefinitely. If he isn't willing to get personal therapy to learn to be happy and secure with himself, then it's a cycle that will never break. The only thing that will break is your commitment to him. And looks like it's happening now. Space holding is exhausting. Having been in your husband's position, it can be a hard cycle to get out of. Oftentimes it is something unrelated to the relationship that is triggering this. Example, work not going that well, making him not feel that great about himself, thus feeling like he isn't worthy in that relationship. Hearing the I love you sometimes falls on deaf ears when you don't love yourself at that moment. It is ultimately up to him to open up, communicate, and be vulnerable about it. From your experience, may I ask how you started to feel comfortable with vulnerability? Additionally, how did you come to the understanding within yourself that you had deep-seated insecurity? In my husband's case, he tells me that he is uncomfortable talking to me because he feels like he is not being heard or understood. I've tried many ways of adjusting my communication style so that he feels heard, but now I'm starting to think he's being thick-headed. It's a catch-20 to trying to make him feel comfortable to talk about his feelings. Because he expresses insecurities, but doesn't admit that's what they are. God, I'm living this with mine. I shoved his butt in therapy 2 years ago and finally he's making progress. Fortunately in my case, we aren't married yet and I made him getting help a condition of me sticking around. I told him that I loved him, but his constant negativity and insecurities were going to drive me away from him. That I'm not here to fix him, and I won't stand for constantly being put on the spot to prove to him and his anxiety that I love him no matter what. It's tiring, exhausting and frustrating, not to mention that behavior 100% impacted our sex life because since I couldn't respect him, I wasn't in the mood ever. Anxious-avoidant relationships are the hardest. My fiance was like your husband when we first started dating. She wanted to hug after we came home from work, but she didn't want to ask me to hug her. She wanted me to do it on my own. So, I did it. I still do it 6 years later. She wanted a lot of love, yes, more communication, and I did it. I took an extra 10-15 minutes from my day, sure, but it made a lot of difference to her. And I don't care if I have to provide extra reassurance to her because she is there for me in so many ways that it was not even a compromise on my end. She still gets anxious sometimes, but for the most part she has learned to ask for what she wants cause she knows 1. I'm willing and able to meet her needs, and 2. I will not ridicule and belittle her needs as being needy and childish, so she is more secure about her needs. So unless your husband is convinced that you don't see his needs as childish or whiny, he will continue to respond in a defensive way and the chasm between you guys will keep increasing. I'll start with echoes for calls to therapy and such. To add to that, some of the things you describe I feel are common things now. Some people take the idea of feeling heard or understood or validated to extremes and use those sentiments anytime they feel uncomfortable or just want to get out of taking responsibility for their own actions. I spent many years monitoring my own language to manage my partner's feelings. It was exhausting and a foolish thing to do. I too lost respect, but lacked the tools to ensure I looked after myself properly, assuming that staying together is the goal and therapy is unlikely. I feel there are some things worth trying. Remind yourself that his feelings of insecurity have nothing to do with you. It doesn't matter how much you reassure, build up, say things, or do things, he will always feel insecure until he decides within himself to not feel that way anymore. Remind yourself each day out loud that you are supportive, you are kind, and your partner's feelings are his own responsibility. Focus the conclusion of conversions really hard on actions, particularly SMART style goals. Anytime feelings of insecurity are brought up, listen and ask, okay, what do you think I should do about that? Try different pronouns to see what works best, and write it down together, and come up with a goal and tasks. It has to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and have a set time frame, and clarify at the end, okay, so if we do this thing, it will help reduce your feelings of insecurity. What will that look like? How will we know if it has helped or not? Get really specific. Find creative ways for him to measure or track his feelings. The time frame component is really important because you can both check in on progress. It is not this never-ending "oh, I have to process that" cycle. There is nowhere to hide. He'll likely disengage from the process a lot because it will mean effort, work, and you not telling him he's wonderful every 10 minutes. But that's his choice, and you just have to shrug and go, okay, that's up to you, and disengage. Then next time the feelings come up, start the action setting and goal setting all over again. It sounds really dry and boring and weird, but adding this structure can break the never-ending loop of expressing feelings, validating, listening, etc. Those are positive things, but by themselves don't affect change. Don't be afraid to include this in other parts of your joint life. It's super effective when done well. It is also the reason why go to therapy is too vague and the therapy doesn't work unless a goal is set before engaging a therapist or very early on. It is really easy for a person to disengage and go, yeah, well, that didn't work. It was impossible for it to work because there was no clear criteria of success or commitment to get there. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.